All right, Bigger Pockets community. It says we are live here, so hopefully that is the case. Uh, Happy New Year. I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard it, but this is the first time we're talking, so I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. 2020 is behind us for better or worse, and we are facing down 2021. I am here to talk apartments and rentals and do the best that I can to answer your questions so that you can get 2021 off to a great start. So when you do join us, and whoever's pumping the hearts out on Instagram, I really appreciate that. Love seeing that. Thank you very much. When you join, please let us know where you're joining from. We love to hear where people are coming from across the country and across the world. We've had Israel, Germany, you name it. Still hoping to get someone who's in Antarctica, but we'll see if that ever happens. And so let us know where you're coming from, and then on Facebook, please hit like, and then also post your question in the comments. We'll bounce back and forth between answering questions on Instagram and Facebook. Last couple of times, Instagram has won. So let's see if Facebook can maybe take the title for the most amount of questions this time around. So hello, Daniel from Fairfield, Connecticut. Oh, hey, we got someone from India, Wichita, Kansas, San Diego, not far from me at all. Vero75 from Texas, Sarah from Claremont, California, and Sprongster from Seal Beach, which is also California. So the West Coast is representing today, Spokane, Washington. So, all right, well, again, go ahead, start posting your questions. We're off to an interesting start to the year with the result of the Georgia runoff elections, and apparently the Senate, U.S. Senate, will be split 50-50. Hello, Martin from Ventura, California, and Hawk Dog from Toronto. With the Senate split 50-50, the perception is now that the incoming administration will be putting out much larger stimulus than was originally projected or agreed upon by the current arrangement in Washington. And so if anybody who's been watching Treasury rates this week, they've had a massive move. They've got a 10-year Treasury has gone up about 20%. It started off at 0.91% at the beginning of the week. And as of Friday afternoon, it closed right at, I think, 1.09. And why is that important? Well, most of our commercial mortgages are based on that 10-year Treasury. So it looks like mortgage rates might start creeping up in the commercial real estate world. Now, there's a huge amount of room for that to happen, because right now the spread between cap rates and rates is actually really wide. So those rates can come up and cap rates can stay the same. But definitely something to watch. And if you're underwriting deals, make sure that you are watching interest rates so that you're not underwriting with a rate that's too low, right? Because debt is a huge. Lane Fitness 22 just put debt on Instagram here, and that he's absolutely. I didn't just posted the word, but I'm going to go ahead and say he's absolutely right. The keys to a good rental investment are buy it right, operate it right, and finance it right. You have to have the right debt that goes with your business plan and that matches your purchase price and cash flow and all of that. So with that said, we got some questions coming in, and hey, Facebook's representing. Hello, Jose from Massachusetts. That is my original home state. And then Mike Brown asks, hey, Andrew, Mike here from Philadelphia. Have you ever, I cannot hear Philadelphia or West Philadelphia and not immediately follow up with born and raised. Any of you from the 90s will know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, I get back to the question. Have you ever heard of anyone using a 401k loan to pay down equity and refinance? Yes, I actually have heard people doing that. The objective would be to get rid of PMI, which is private mortgage insurance, and significantly increase cash flow and pay yourself the interest, not the bank. I have heard of people doing that strategy. I have not used it myself. It can be a good strategy. Just when you're looking at doing that, just factor in your ability to repay, and then what your long-term plans are for that retirement account, right? I know when I look at retirement, the bulk of my retirement is real estate, right? My goal is to have enough real estate that supports retirement. But if that 401k is either an emergency backup or a retirement nest egg. Just be careful that you don't decimate that and don't have that as a reserve. But that is definitely a valid strategy. Lots of people do it. Good questions. Pete Griggs asked, is flipping houses a better strategy to get started in investing? And thank you, Ross30, for on Instagram for realizing that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is timeless. So flipping houses can be a great way to get into real estate investing. That's how I did it, but it wasn't part of any master plan. I actually just kind of stumbled into flipping and said, hey, wow, this is a great way I can quit my job and go flip houses. And then after a few years, for any of you guys who've heard my Bigger Pockets episodes, I think it's 170 and 279, we went into apartments full time back in 2011 because flipping was kind of like another job, right? You're only good as your last deal. You get a check and you're done. And then you have to go perform again. But it can be a great way to get into real estate because you can generate large chunks of cash. And if you can do it in a way that you can reinvest that back into your real estate business, then you can often scale up pretty quickly. And there's some amazing flippers who've been interviewed on Bigger Pockets who are doing hundreds of deals a year, netting seven-figure profits each year doing it. I would highly recommend listening to those episodes, but that's definitely not the only way. For example, David Green, he worked as a cop, saved all the money he could, and bought, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 10 or 15 rentals, single family rental properties before he quit working as a police officer, right? And then now he's an agent and does the other things. So flipping is a great way. It's definitely not the only way. I've known people who've gone straight into buying, significant sized apartments. They go partner with some people and they dive right in. So that's another way of doing it. So let me see here. Tikwadwani on Instagram asks, do you think a triplex is a good first choice of real estate investment? Probably is. I would say if it gets you into the game and it cash flows well, so that and you run the numbers right, and it sets you up to start your real estate business, then the triplex absolutely can be a good first investment. And really getting back to I mentioned earlier, the key is to get started and to do something to get in it, right? So if you buy a single family house and that's the first thing you do and you hold it as a rental, that's a great investment. If you flip a condo and that gets you started, that's a great investment. If you do a triplex, that's a great investment. If you start off with a 20-unit apartment building, that's a good investment. The key is buy it in the right market, put the right debt on it, make sure you run the numbers properly, and do it. You're taking action to get started. So, all right, let me see here. And again, Wacko Kev on Instagram kind of asked a similar question. Should I buy a single family home or a duplex for my first property? The answer to me is whichever one gets you started and gets you in the business. You could buy that single family and rent out bedrooms and house hack. Or you could do a slow burr on it, right? You move in, you fix it up, you sell it 2 years later, a year later, whatever. But you could also buy that duplex, and if you run the numbers right, you rent out the other side, and now somebody else is basically paying the entire mortgage, right? So there's lots of different ways to do it. Let me see here. We're going to pop over to Facebook. Jose asks, what are the few most important things to learn when investing in property? Well, we could spend the rest of our hour talking about that, but I would say a couple of things are, one, know what your goals are, right? Because we just talked a lot about, hey, you can start with buying a single family rental, you can do flipping, you can do apartments, you can do all these different things. So number one, the first is to know what your goals are, because if you chase one of the beautiful things about real estate is there's so many ways to do it, so many ways to make money. And the downside of that is it can be very easy to get distracted, right? Well, I'm going to do mobile homes or apartments, and I'm going to get a duplex, and I want to, flip houses, and I'm going to do a burr, and all these things. All of them are valid strategies, but not everyone's the best strategy for you, right? So the most important thing is to figure out what your goals are and which of all those strategies are going to get you to those goals. And then once you're at that point, go through all the material in Bigger Pockets, the podcast, the forums, the various products that are available. You can learn basically everything you need to know for basic understanding through Bigger Pockets. Go to meetups, network with people, and also find some people that are ahead of you. and doing what you decide you want to do at a high level. So, let's say you say, all right, I want to buy small apartments between 10 and 20 units, right? Well, you find somebody that has just done a couple, and because they're a step ahead of you, you can learn from them. Also find someone that's maybe done 500 units, right? Because you can learn from them. How did they scale? How did they get that big? What were some of the things they learned along the way? So that's real important. And then it's learning how to underwrite properly so you get your numbers right. It's learning how to select the right markets to be in, markets with good income and population growth, and all of those things. And really, the biggest one is don't do it alone. Make sure you find mentors, make sure you find partners, build a good team. David Green's book, Long Distance Real Estate Investing, if you're going to do it outside of your home market, definitely read that book. It applies to either single families or multifamilies, and those are some of the most important things to do when getting started. So, all right, we got lots of questions here. Benjamin Smith on Instagram asks a great question. Hey, how do you not fear starting? The answer is, in my opinion, you don't. You should always have a healthy amount of fear in you when you're doing deals, especially bigger and bigger deals, right? So, for example, we have a deal under contract. When we close it, it'll put us at somewhere over 2,100 units, right? And even after 13 years of doing the real estate business, whenever I get a property under contract, and I'm knowing that I'm committing us to performing, and then I'm going to have other people's money at stake that I am now responsible for, there's always just a little bit of fear. There's always that moment where I wake up at 2:37 in the morning and go, oh crap, did we look at that, right? And of course, I usually get up and go look at it. I'm like, oh yeah, we looked at that 18 times already, so it's fine. So there's just, first of all, recognize that a little bit of fear is healthy because it keeps you from being overconfident, and overconfidence, just like never acting can lead to ruin, being overconfident can lead to ruin. So learn to accept and work through the fear. And how you do that is really, at least for me, and what I found is, number one, whatever I'm fearing, just dive head into it, right? What if I lose? Okay, what if this deal goes bad and we lose money? Well, okay, sit down and analyze, how could it lose money? How can it go bad? And then what can you do to mitigate those things, right? And sometimes it's, hey, you know what, this deal is not a good deal, I'm going to pass. And then you do that analysis, you say, well, hey, you know what, the downside is not that risky. I can mitigate it these ways, and the upside is here, and that outweighs the upside outweighs the downside, and therefore it's a risk worth taking, right? So that's why we talk about risk adjusted returns. Sometimes you can take a low risk and get a return, or you can take a high risk and get a return. And then the final thing, as far as addressing the fear, and kind of gets back to what we were talking about before. A really good way to do it is to find a partner or a mentor with more experience that can look over your shoulder and guide you, right? That's what we did to get started. There was no way I was going to go out and try to buy a 92-unit apartment complex and raise, at the time, $1.2 million without somebody else looking over it. One, for my own sanity, and two, so that we would do a good job with other people's money. So recognize that the fear is always going to be there if you're doing it right to some degree, and that you just have to address it, and that's how you move through it. So good question. That applies to all of us. And like I said, for those of you who are scared of getting started, in general, really sit down and say, truly, what's the worst thing that could happen, and how could I recover from it? And then on that flip side, say, what's the best thing that could happen? And when you sit down objectively and look at that, usually the best case scenario far outweighs the worst case scenario. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on. We've got some quite good questions on Facebook. So your Facebook is catching up this time around. So we'll go with David Solano on Facebook, who asks, for those who don't have capital to invest themselves, would you recommend partnerships? If so, what qualities, good and bad, should we look for in the prospective partner? Yeah, if you don't have capital yourself, I'd say there's two main ways to do that. One is, like you said, David, you can just partner with somebody who either has capital or who has access to capital. That's the quick and easy, solution. And that's in a sense, that's kind of what I did. The first syndication that I did was a real struggle. It took me 6 months to raise that money, and then I said, "Wow, I almost didn't. I almost failed to close that. That raise was a lot harder than I thought." So then I actually partnered my mentor and I. We got along really well. So I actually partnered with him on the next two deals, so that he could help raise, so that we were co-GPs. And then almost, I think every deal since then has been either partnered with them or some other guys that I partnered with in the GoBundance Mastermind that I'm in. So partnering is definitely a way to do it. And then also keep in mind, syndication or private money is a way to share your opportunity with somebody else. You're finding the deal, you're doing the work, they have the capital, you can both benefit. And then you asked, what qualities, good and bad, should we look for in the prospective partner? Well, if you can find that partner by referrals, that's the best way. You want someone, that their goals are aligned with yours. Their ethics and morals are aligned with yours. They are people of integrity, and ideally someone who's done it before. So, and I want to catch Veronica's question here on Instagram. Veronica Brooks asked, "How did you find your mentor?" Well, how I found mine was we had hired a coach for flipping. And when we wanted to go into apartments, we said, "Hey, do you know anybody that we could learn apartments from?" And he said, "Well, actually, I do." And he introduced me to someone that he knew who had done about 800 units at the time. And we said, "Hey, can we hire you, as a coach?" And he said, "Well, it's funny you ask. I was actually just about to consider starting to do that." So we worked something out and we hired him for a year. And then we got along so well, as I mentioned before, we became partners on, and I think we did, six of our deals were done as partners with him, right? So that's how we found our original mentor, was word of mouth. And I still think that probably is the best way, because if you're getting a referral, that person is going to be hopefully vetted by the person that's referring them to you. And then, also when somebody refers somebody to you, the person doing the referring, in one sense, is putting their reputation on the line a little bit too. So hopefully that's going to be, hold a little bit of value. Outside of that, Veronica, I'd keep in mind that don't have too narrow of a definition of mentor, right? So right now, I don't have a paid mentor, but if I were to go through, I could probably name 10 people that I consider to be my mentors, right? So what do I mean by that? So there's, I have a friend in Texas who's done about 10,000 units, very smart, sophisticated owner operator. And, I probably talk with him once every 2 or 3 months. He's somebody that whenever I have a question or I want input, whether it's on a property or the market, I can call him, I can text him, get his feedback. And he's much more ahead of, when it comes to scaling in the units, he's far ahead of me, right? I'm at like a little over 2,000. He's at 10. So I see him as a mentor. There are other people that I talk to maybe once a week or once a month. Same thing. They're ahead of me, but I can, we talk, I get information, we share information. So keep in mind that a mentor does not have to be this big formal thing, right? Especially, you don't meet someone and go, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" That's like, meeting someone at a bar and say, "Hey, you want to get engaged?" It's just a little too big of a jump, and it kind of puts people off. So, I would recommend doing it that way. Just try to find people that are ahead of you that you can add value to, and build a bunch of informal mentor relationships. And yes, there are people out there, that you can hire for, just for a formal mentor relationship. I do a little bit of that, and on a selective basis, and quite a few other owner operators will do the same. So you can do that, and also just networking. You'll find people who on bigger pockets. And then the final thing, I'll circle back to what I said earlier about finding ways to add value to people who are ahead of you. If you can we a lot of times on the podcast, you hear people say, "Oh, work for free." It's not really working for free. It's an exchange of value. It's working for education and mentorship, right? So even if it's only a few hours a week or whatever, if you can work for free for somebody who's ahead of you, then that person is effectively a mentor. And if you do a great job of adding value, then most people will want to reciprocate and add value back to you and contribute and become a mentor. I can think of a handful of people who I've just bumped into or met on Bigger Pockets over the years, and they've kind of hung around and asked some questions and try and add value to what I'm doing. And now when they have questions, they'll give me a call or something like that, and I'm happy to help or talk to them or answer because of that approach to mentorship. So great question. That is a really important one. Thanks, Veronica, for jumping in and asking that. So I'm going. Oh, let's see here. Let's see. A case one on Instagram. Where can I go, or which events to meet some of those people? Start with Bigger Pockets and the Bigger Pockets meetups. Of course, most stuff is virtual right now, but I would recommend conferences in addition to the Bigger Pockets community. So, for example, IMN has conferences around the country. A lot of the big brokerage houses like Brocadia, Marcus and Millichap, they hold conferences where you can go and meet other owners and operators, and just general local real estate meetups. Just think of where would people who you want to grow up to be hanging out, and go put yourself there. That's really the answer to the question. And yeah, right now a lot of it is on Zoom, but even, for example, I know there some of the other quote unquote gurus do conferences and virtual conferences. Well, other investors are there. The speakers there are typically more advanced, and you can go and just really, sometimes the greatest value of those things is the networking. I mean, the presentations may be good, they may be not, but the networking can be fantastic. So, in fact, I actually met one of our highest net worth investors, Dave Lindahl, who I don't think is teaching anymore. He came to LA, and just out of curiosity, I wanted to see what it was like. So I went and attended the boot camp for 2 days, and just kind of networked, and ended up meeting, an investor who's worth 8 figures, because she was there also, and she's invested in a handful of our deals. So you can do that for investors, mentors, partners, you name it. So. All right. We got lots of questions here. I'm going to take a sip of coffee while I decide which one is next. And while I'm doing that, if you can hit the like button and the hearts, I would definitely appreciate it. Okay, Horatio on Facebook asks a interesting question. I need to find a 10 plus unit apartment building that the owner needs to or would like to sell ASAP. So you're looking for the motivated seller. And thank you for the hearts on Instagram, who's ever doing that. And all right, we got a bunch of hearts and crowns. I like that. All right. So I need to find a 10 plus unit apartment building the owner needs to or would like to sell ASAP. Probably the best way to do that, and Horatio's in Miami. I got a coaching client that's buying in Miami. So keep in mind, everyone, that the apartment and rental market has been so strong for so long, and the cash flow is so good. There really aren't a lot of motivated sellers right now. In saying that, assuming that motivation is related to financial distress or anything like that. Now, with that said, thank those who, especially in the smaller properties. So Horatio, this is exactly what, 10 units, 20 units, 30 units, that kind of stuff. Those tend to be, one-time investor owned, mom and pop owned, and which generally means not quite as professional or sophisticated management or operational skills or resources. So when we get into things like eviction moratoriums, like we have right now, and that have been keep going on and on and on, and you've got a 10 unit and it's owned by a dentist who's busy with his practice, and now he's got 4 people who aren't paying their rent, and he can't evict them, and now he's having trouble making the mortgage and paying expenses. that can lead to motivated sellers. So how do you, and then there's also just, there's death, there's divorce, there's sickness, there's, hey, I just want to retire and get rid of this thing, I'm tired of doing it, all those kind of things. So how do you find those people? One, network like crazy with local brokers and realtors, because I've seen some really good smaller properties under 50 units come up on the residential MLS. Because someone knew a realtor and they're like, hey, will you list this? And the realtor is like, oh, I don't know what to do with an apartment complex, but I'm not going to turn this down. So they put it on the residential MLS, right? And it's often mispriced. So network like crazy with brokers and residential real estate agents. And then also in the apartment space where you're talking about properties that are less than 50 units, that's where if you go, you can go direct to owner with a fairly high level of success, right? So maybe get a list of properties from your local title company or a data provider like Reonomy or CoStar or something like that. They're not cheap, but they're worth it if you're doing deals. And you can generate a list of properties that fit the criteria you want. And then you'll get some contact information, have somebody, you can do some skip tracing and get contact information for the people who aren't on there, and then reach out directly to those people and start forming relationships and seeing if there's anybody who is motivated and wants to sell. And you never know, you could end up talking to somebody who isn't motivated now, but 2 years down the road, they could have something that becomes motivating and they call you and say, hey, I would like to sell to you now. Thanks for helping me out for the last 2 years. So, all right, Victor, the realtor, says, thanks for sharing your knowledge. You're welcome. I appreciate that and enjoy talking with everybody and getting the opportunity here. And let me see here. All right, Lane Fitness 22. Hey, I think I remember you from last time. So thanks for rejoining. All right, Lane on Instagram asks, is it best to start investing in property after getting a real estate license to have a better understanding of properties? Based on how you phrase your question, I'm going to say no, because you mentioned getting a real estate license to have a better understanding of properties. Getting a real estate license is more, at least in California, is more about how to represent buyers and sellers, how to follow the rules of transacting, realtor code of ethics, all of that kind of stuff. And you'll find that most realtors really don't understand real estate that well at all, but even especially from an investor's perspective, right? And then you'll find that the handful of realtors that do understand it are the ones that are just out there crushing it, right? The ones who are doing a couple hundred transactions a year and doing really well. So if you're looking at a real estate license to just better understand properties, I would say no. Go learn that through Bigger Pockets and all the other mediums that are out there for doing that. If you want to get a real estate license to have access to MLS or to be able to have a way to list properties or something like that, then that can certainly help. But I wouldn't do it just to understand properties. Candidly, by listening to Bigger Pockets and reading books and everything, you'll probably get a better understanding than most realtors have. But good question. All right, let's keep going here. Lots of thumbs up. I certainly appreciate that. Oh, I hit the wrong. I seem to not be able to scroll without bringing up the my keyboard, which is not helping. All right. Crystal on Instagram asks, we are in New England. Love New England, especially in October, and have been playing with multiple ideas. What style income property do you recommend starting with? We have looked at multifamily and commercial space. So when it comes to deciding between multifamily and commercial, keep in mind that with commercial, you typically only have one tenant or maybe a couple of tenants, right? So let's say you're buying a small commercial strip center that has 4 tenants in it, maybe a barber shop and a small restaurant and eyebrow threading or whatever else it might be. Especially in today's environment, if 1 or 2 of those goes out of business, you're going to lose 25 or 50% of your revenue. And now it's a question of, hey, can you make your mortgage payment? Can you cover expenses? And then often in commercial properties, in order to get a new tenant in, which is going to be very difficult the next few years, you have to spend a lot of money on T&I, which is tenant improvements, right? So if you had a barber shop and then your new tenant is going to be a restaurant or something like that, you've got to spend a lot of money remodeling that part of your property to fit the new tenant. So, commercial, you certainly can make a lot of money at it. Lots of people do. It's just it can have higher risk. What I really like about multifamily, especially the bigger you get, is number one, people always have to have housing one way or another. That is generally the last thing to go, right? So it's one of the most important things. Everyone has to have a place to sleep or live at some point. So it tends to be the most stable. Second of all, if you've got 10 units and you lose one or two tenants, your income goes down, but generally not enough to make it so you can't pay expenses or pay the mortgage, right? So it lets you diversify your risk across a greater number of tenants, and therefore, with good management and good service to the residents, multifamily generally carries a lot less risk than commercial. So, all right, good question. Let me see here. We'll keep going. Let's see. In regards to Kianalon on Instagram asks, in regards to reserves, how do you typically handle? That's a really good question, and I want to address it because candidly, that is probably one of the bigger mistakes that I see people make getting into apartments in particular. Is they go in, especially if they're syndicating, they go in and they don't bring in enough capital for sufficient reserves, right? They say, okay, I got to buy it for this. My transaction cost for this. I'm going to spend this much on renovations. And okay, that's how much I need to raise. Well, that leaves no margin for error. What if there's some additional capital expenditures that you didn't plan on? What if operating expenses are higher and your tax assessment comes in way higher than you thought? What if income either falls or doesn't go up as much as you planned? So generally speaking, the bare minimum for us, we like to see reserves of 3 months of expenses, including the mortgage. So whatever that number works out, that's kind of the minimum. If we can do it, we like to see 6 months. And that would apply whether it's a small property or big property or anything. So I would say minimum 3 to 6 months is kind of a good rule of thumb for reserves, but it also depends on your personal ability, right? So if you're buying a duplex and you still have $500,000 cash in the bank, okay, you probably don't need to worry about reserves quite as much, because if something goes wrong with the duplex, you're going to be able to cover it. But if you buy that duplex and you had to invest everything you've got in order to get that duplex, then you're going to want to have a separate account in the name of whatever entity owns that duplex, where you keep 3 to 6 months of reserves, because you want to, the only time you really, really get in trouble with real estate is if you lose it, right? You have to sell it or get foreclosed on at the wrong time. And it was always the wrong time to get foreclosed on. But if you get foreclosed on or have to sell it at the wrong time, because with real estate, generally speaking, as long as you can hold it long enough, it's self-correcting, right? So part of the way you make sure that you have that benefit is that you can always make the mortgage payment, cover the expenses, and know that it might happen where you can't do that. And so you want to have those reserves set aside no matter what. Don't touch them for anything else. Hernando says foreclosure auctions have been canceled in Texas since March, with a big angry face emoji. Yeah, we've there's been a lot of things have made the last 9 months a struggle, and in real estate investing. So you've got mortgage auctions have been canceled. We've had eviction moratoriums going on for a year now. I think in LA, they extended the eviction moratorium to like January 1st of 2022. So I don't know how you can be a landlord and have residents not pay you for another entire year and not lose the property. So definitely some challenges out there. And how I like to approach it is, okay, we can't change a lot of this stuff. So what might this lead to down the road, and how can we set ourselves up to take advantage of it, right? So foreclosure auctions have been canceled since March. They can't just cancel them forever, right? So at some point, I'm going to say one of two things is going to happen. One, they're going to go ahead and start foreclosing like crazy, or two, they're going to start modifying loans like crazy. And from my experience in the last recession, 2008, 2009, those loan modifications don't always work out. So if I was in Texas or any other states where this is happening and there's no foreclosures, number one, I would find a strategy that works right now in today's market. But then two, I'd be setting myself up to take advantage of what's probably going to be some kind of wave of foreclosures down the road, right? Because you can only kick this can down the road for so long. And it might not be the tsunami that it was in the last Great Recession, but they're definitely going to come back. Yeah, Hernando says, good luck with eviction with Biden now as president. They have talked about extending that even further. So actually, let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. What do you do if you're in a place where there's an eviction moratorium when, whether you've got a single family rental or a 200-unit apartment complex, this applies, right? You got an eviction moratorium, you got people who aren't paying, what do you do? I mean, the fact of the matter is, as a landlord, it definitely puts you behind the eight ball. Your options are limited, but doesn't mean you don't have any options. So here's some of the things that we have done, and we've had fairly good amounts of success with. One, there are lots of entities and organizations out there that are working to help people pay their rent. In fact, the most recent round of stimulus included, I think, $200 million per state or something like that, to go to these agencies to help people pay rent. So whatever market you're in, find out who those agencies are, connect your residents with those agencies so that the agencies can help them pay rent. There's also just a number of charities, all those kind of things. Also, there's new stimulus checks coming out, right? So what you can do is say you can go say you've got a resident who hasn't paid in 2 months. You say, hey, look, I'll match your stimulus, right? If you bring your stimulus check in and apply it 100%, apply it to catching up on rent, I'll match you 1 for 1, right? So if they bring in their $600, you say, okay, I'll give you credit for $1,200. You're caught up. Let's keep going. Now, if you've got somebody who's completely unemployed and they have no hope of being unemployed or paying the rent, then maybe that's not going to work. But if it's just a matter of somebody getting caught up, it's probably better to do that and recognize there are lots of people who, through no fault of their own, have been negatively affected by this. So a lot of what we've been doing is just trying to recognize that and work with people. So we've also been waiving late fees and saying, all right, if you can get caught up, we won't charge you the usual late fees that we charge. We put people on payment plans. And then you say, okay, well, that's all great, but I have some tenants who are just taking advantage of this. They're not communicating with me. They've made it very clear they have no intention of paying rent. They're going to stay as long as they can. That gets very difficult, but there's some things you still can do. One, if you can catch them on non-financial lease violations, you still can evict for reasons not related to non-payment of rent, right? So let's say they've got illegal pets. Let's say they're doing things in the community that violate the lease. You still can evict them on those grounds. Another one, and don't forget, any of you who've done foreclosures will know this well, but it can be a tool that we have that you can use in the rental world, and we certainly have used, is cash for keys. We've gone to certain residents and said, hey, look, we understand this is a difficult situation, and we try to give them grace and the ability to save face, and we say, hey, look, we understand this probably maybe you've been trying to do what you can to catch up on rent. And maybe you can't do that, but we also, we have mortgages to pay and bills to pay. So here's the deal. Instead of us having to evict you and have that on your credit report and go to collections, we'll make you a deal. If you give us the unit back in 2 weeks, we'll pay you $500 and we'll forgive your past due rent, and we won't file eviction or collections, right? So what happens? Number one, they get $500. They don't get an eviction on their credit report, and they don't end up in collections. Two, for you as the landlord, you get that unit back, and you can lease it to somebody else for $700 or $1,000 a month or whatever it is. So now you have an income stream, right? So is it ideal as a landlord? Would you normally do that in a normal market? Absolutely not. But in today's market, that is one way to work things out. So keep that in mind. It is difficult, but if you get creative, you can usually find a way to work with most people. So, all right, great question. let me see here. Instagram stop scrolling. So let me get caught up. Pat asks, what are the benefits to buying rental property in California? Well, the short answer is I refuse to buy rental property in California because it is such a business unfriendly state, very tenant friendly and antagonistic towards landlords, and very high tax. So I don't buy rental property in California. I stay out. I enjoy living here, but invest where it makes sense so we can get really good returns. But you asked what are the benefits. So one of the benefits of buying property in California is historically the values in California tend to go up dramatically. So if you can get a property and hold on to it long enough, you're probably going to build a lot of equity over time. That's probably the one benefit, or one of the few benefits, in my opinion. Another is in most markets in California, and like Sacramento, Bay Area, Southern California, LA, San Diego, Orange County, there's always going to be demand for housing here. We're kind of out of space. The weather is amazing. Despite the disadvantages, there's tons of people who still want to live here. You're always going to be able to sell, especially if you're flipping. But that's about it. Otherwise, I don't recommend California for rental properties. So, all right. Hernando says buy in San Antonio, Texas, 10 to 15% cap rates. I have heard lots of good things about San Antonio. It is growing. It does seem to be a good market for rentals and apartments. In fact, a friend of mine, his entire apartment portfolio is in San Antonio. He buys 100 to 200 unit properties, and he's been doing really well. So, yeah, I would say don't. I'm not sure, Pat, if you're in California, but if you are, don't limit yourself to your backyard or geography. You could, in today's technology and environment, you can invest anywhere just as effectively as you could in your own backyard. All right. Oh yes, a couple people have asked for my Instagram. Thank you, Nikki, for posting that. It's just Vantage Point Acquisitions. And let's see, the live feed will be saved. And let me see if I can get caught up on questions here. All right, so Facebook, you're off to a good start, starting to slow down a little bit. So we'll see what we got on Instagram, and maybe Facebook you can get caught up. All right. All right, Nino says, "I don't want to work for no one. Goals to be your own boss." That is a good goal, and that was part of why I got into real estate. Is I knew even in high school that I wanted to do my own thing, and when I didn't do it right away. It took me working 7 years as an engineer before we figured out real estate, and I had a fantastic boss. My boss was a great guy. I'm still friends with him to this day, 13 years after quitting. But there is a tremendous amount of benefit to working for yourself, and building a good team to work with. So yes, and part of doing that is setting your goals. All right, Steve says, "What's up from Jensen Beach, Florida? Love Florida, great investment market." And thanks for reminding me, guys. Whenever you post comments, please let us know where you are posting from. All right. Ray Jensen says books are your best source. I guess he's answering somebody else's question. Let's keep rolling here. Lots of thumbs up. I appreciate that. J3 says on Instagram, in regards to being a realtor or getting a license, says keep in mind if you have a license, you have a code of ethics you need to maintain. Well, one, I hope that regardless of whether or not you have a license, you're still going to maintain a high level of ethics. But what she's probably referencing is, as a realtor, licensed realtor, it actually kind of restricts you on some things of what you can do and what you can say when you're working with certain sellers and certain types of transactions, because you're not just an investor, you're a realtor now, and some of those things vary by state. So she brings up a good point. If you get a license, that it gives you some additional rules to follow. So all right. V8 says, "This is great. Thank you. What's your Instagram?" Again, Vantage Point Acquisitions. Also, if you Google Vantage Point Acquisitions, our website, vpacq.com, will come up. It's the top result. You can reach out, connect to us through there as well. Okay, yes, I didn't see Sam Welch mentioned you should maintain the code of ethics anyway, which is what I just said. So thank you, Sam. I agree completely. Let me see. We'll keep on going here. Rusty is in New York City. Hopefully things are improving there. And let me see. All right, let's pick some more of these questions. Oh, okay. Ross 30 says 10 years ago, could you have decided to do something else aside from real estate that would have had a better or similar yield? For me, the answer to that would be no. In fact, part of the reason I was in my job for 7.5 years before I got into real estate is during that time frame I got married and my wife had the same goals that I did, and we tried all kinds of other businesses. We looked into starting a vending business. We started doing flavored popcorn, thinking, hey, maybe we'll sell that. We started making things and selling them like T-shirts and branded stuff, and selling it on eBay. And what we found is every one of those things that we did. Oh, we did even started a car flipping business. You can go buy those at auction and fix them up and resell them, and which is probably not a good idea considering how not mechanical I am. But hey, it could have worked. But what we found is all of those businesses really were just another form of having a job for ourselves, and the amount of hard work versus the return just wasn't there. And so real estate offered the greatest amount of freedom and return on our time and effort uh, invested. And so, no, even after 13 years now, I cannot think of something I would rather have gone into than real estate. But great question. Thank you for asking that. That's no one's ever asked that before, and that was a good one. So all right, let's keep on rolling here. We're down to about 15 minutes left. So if you've been saving a question or just kind of hanging on to it and haven't posted it yet, now's the time to do it. And thank you for the stream of hearts on Instagram. Kay Laffman asks, "Are you concerned about vacancy rates moving into 2021?" I don't know if I would say concerned, but it is definitely a factor that we are watching. So, it depends heavily on what market you're in and what demographic that you rent to, right? So, if you've got a C-class property that primarily, services lower income residents, maybe a lot of them work in restaurants and hospitality and the service industry, then yeah, I probably would be pretty concerned about vacancy rates heading into 2021. And if I was buying a property or operating a property that fit that description, I would definitely underwrite much higher vacancy rates for at least 2021. Right now, I do believe things will start getting better, both health wise and economically, towards the end of 2021. And every forecast I've seen, seems to indicate that. But the first 6 months could be kind of rough, especially if you've got that kind of lower income property. So it is something I would be concerned about in the short term. Just if you're buying property, make sure you underwrite for that, and then realize that it should come back over time. In the B class prop space where most of our properties are, excuse me, we have not seen that much of an increase in vacancy and delinquency, maybe just a couple of percent. And some of the more like B plus properties, we haven't seen any real increase in delinquency or vacancy. So it depends a lot on your market and the type of property. And when you're looking at properties, this kind of gets back to a fundamental of underwriting. When you're doing your due diligence, look at where your residents work, right? Are 50% of them working at the chicken plant down the street? Well, if that chicken plant closes, you're going to be hosed, right? Or 60% of them, at the Army base. And what happens if they all get deployed, right? Ideally, your property has residents that work across a diverse group of industries and job sources. So great question. Let me see here. Thanks. I appreciate that. All right. I've got to answer this one just because it's in Alaska. All right. On Instagram. All right. Laura Crow in the process to buy another townhome in Alaska. I absolutely love Alaska. I've been skiing in the Chugach out of Girdwood, and just one of the most amazing trips of my life. For a future rental in the spring, should I sell my single family home or rent it during these crazy times? Um, you know, I guess it depends on whether or not you need to and what your long-term outlook is. I mean, if you can find a qualified renter for the home and you're no longer living there and you're comfortable having them in, then yeah, I would if it was me, I would probably lean towards go ahead and renting it out. Now, if you can take the cash from that single family and put it to better use somewhere else, then maybe you would want to sell it. But I do feel like uh, without commenting on whether on the direction of things and whether or not it's good or bad, I do think things will settle down through 2021, both health wise, politically, all of that. I do think the economy will start coming back. I think the rental market's going to, it really has actually stayed pretty strong, but I think it's going to take off even more. So if your concern is, oh, will I be able to get a renter? I don't think, to me, as long as you've got the right product and you price it right and it cash flows, that wouldn't be the biggest concern. Just make sure, if you're worried about, oh, hey, what if they stop paying and now they're going to sit there and I can't get them out. Things you can do is you can take a much bigger deposit. You can try to find someone who maybe will prepay 6 months of rent. That does happen. And just try to figure out, whatever your main concern is, just see if you can find a way to mitigate that. But I wouldn't let it stop you from investing. All right, Clint Blackburn on Facebook says, my rentals are in a rural area. How do I set my rent rates? That is definitely a little bit more difficult to do. The reason being, of course, you just don't have as many comparables, right? So, if you're getting a rental in a city or a town, a lot of times you'll just look at whatever's within a mile or 2 miles of there and say, well, they're renting for this, so my rents are this, right? So if you're in a rural area, number one, definitely plan on higher vacancy and a little bit more time to get units filled. But as far as setting rates, even if you have to go out 5 miles or 10 miles, go out however far you need to get at least some data, right? And you can look at, rent.com, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. There's all kinds of places where a rentometer where you can kind of get an idea of rental rates, even if the data is a bit sparse. And then as either a last resort or just to verify your data, here's what you can do is pick a rental rate for the property that you think is the right rental rate and post an ad on Craigslist with pictures and the rental rate and the area, but don't post the specific address, and see what the response is, right? If you post it and you get 20 people wanting to move in right away, odds are you picked a rent that's too low. If you post that and it's complete crickets for a week, okay, you probably picked it too high. So in the absence of good data, I would do something along those lines. Post in Craigslist, post on Facebook Marketplace, see what the response is, and then go from there. I know people that's how they decide. That's part of their due diligence on mobile home communities, which are often in rural areas, is they'll post a kind of a ghost ad on Craigslist and see what the response is, and then use that to determine hey, this is how quickly we can fill this park up. So that's what I would do. And great question. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. So if you're holding on to the questions, now is the time to get it posted. And don't forget to keep letting us know where you're coming in from. SMC Johansson says, would you recommend making rentals Section 8 so you're being paid something? Section 8 is, some people hate it, some people love it. One of the benefits that people do like to say is, well, hey, the rent's coming from the government, so I know I'm going to get paid. That seems to have not always been the case during the last year. In fact, I've talked to people who, the government's been several months behind in making those payments. And then also, in many cases, it's partially the government and partially the resident, right? So There's pros and cons to Section 8. If you throw Section 8 into a forum, you're going to have half the people who say Section 8 is awesome. You're going to have half the population, half the group that says Section 8 is terrible, stay away from it. So it really depends on your property and your market, and then your goals of what you want that property to be that would determine whether or not you're going to take Section 8. So that's really kind of that question. So, all right. Yeah, J3 has mentioned, illegal pets violating the lease. That's some of the non-financial ways that you can evict somebody if you need to. What about security deposit? Would you return that also, by Mr. Cast on Instagram? If that's in reference to getting someone to move out of a unit, then yeah, that could be, be creative, right? Not illegally creative, but within the bounds of the rules, be creative. Say, hey, look, you know what? If you just give me this dang unit back in 2 weeks without damaging anything, I'll give you your security deposit back and we'll call it good, right? So absolutely you can do that. Let me see here. And then let's see. David on Facebook asked, hey, Andrew, missed a portion of the video. Will this be offered somewhere to rewatch? Lots of useful information. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, it will be on the Facebook page. These are recorded, so you can go back and review them later. E-Inspiration says rental property in Texas, ? Generally speaking, if you can get it for the right price, that's a good bet. Texas is an economic powerhouse. It's business friendly. It's no income tax. It's growing like crazy. Everybody's moving there. Long term, I do think Texas is a great place to invest. Keep in mind, it is highly competitive. The entire world knows that Texas is a great place to invest. But if you can find a way to get yourself good deals, it's tough to go wrong in Texas. Be careful in some of the outlying markets like Lubbock. There's really difficult to get good labor there. Midland, Odessa is insanely cyclical. It lives and dies by the oil fracking market. But generally, the larger metros, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and the suburbs around those areas are pretty good bets. Martin says it's a seller's market in Ventura, California, almost all of California. Let me see here. All right. Oh, hey, come on. There's a little success story here. EK Real Estate Journey says, great info. We have 2 tenants that are in eviction. One tenant got approved and got agency help. Awesome. And then so we got back the 2 months of rent that they owe. That's a win for everybody, right? They don't get evicted. They keep a roof over their heads. You can pay the mortgage with that rent. So, we really just have to work harder as landlords to be creative to help people out in the current situation. So Frank Mendez says, thoughts on the Ohio market? I hear nothing but raves about that market. I would say be selective. I don't operate in the Ohio market, but I've heard great things about Columbus in particular. There are markets in Ohio that are declining, and you don't want to buy in a declining market. But then there are markets that are growing, and Columbus is one of those markets. I consistently hear good things about it from a perspective of owning rental real estate. So if you like Ohio, I would start with Columbus and go from there. Beyond that, I don't operate or buy in Ohio, not because it's bad, but just because I can't cover the entire country, and I've kind of selected the Southeast as a place where lots of people are moving and things are growing. So I would look at Columbus and start there. Let's see if we can squeeze in a few more in our last 2 minutes. I really appreciate everyone joining on today, asking the questions. This has been a lot of fun. And let me see if we can pick up just a few more of these. All right. Hey, Frank's considering moving to Columbus from Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah, Phoenix has been a good market, but it's gotten so hot and so pricey that it is tough to get good deals there. All right. Instagram. Ali Jodevalt asks, what's your thoughts on house hacking for first-time investors? That can be a fantastic way to get started. And if that's what gets you going, then absolutely do it. You know what? I think back, I don't mention this too often, but technically my first ever property was a house hack. I bought a condo, moved into it, and then rented the other half of it out to a friend. And he was basically paying, in California, it's tough to do with only one other bedroom, but he was paying most of my, actually, no, I think he was paying all of my mortgage, and then I just had to cover everything else. So yeah, house hacking can be a fantastic way to get started, as long as you don't mind having a roommate. Let me say here. All right, we'll see if we can squeeze in one more. What's up from Sarasota, Bradenton, Florida? Bradenton's a good market. Knoxville, Tennessee, you're in a good market too. And all right, Lane Fitness 22 on Instagram. We're gonna make you the last question of the day. What age did you start investing, and did you take out a loan for your first investment? So, not counting my primary residence that I first got, my first real estate investment. I was 29, and it was a single family flip here in Southern California. I got it under contract. I opened escrow. I had no idea where I was going to get the money for it, but it was a great deal. So I started talking to people, and within 24 hours, I found a guy who is for 10% and 2 points was willing to lend us all of the money we needed to purchase that property. And we did that. He provided we just gave him a lien against the property, and we closed on it, and we fixed it up. We sold it a few months later, paid him off, and we made about as much as I used to make at my job all year. So that's when I quit and went full-time into real estate. So we didn't take out a bank loan. We just went and found private money. And that is how we get started. And we still use private money to this day, even on some small apartment complexes. So yeah, that was it, 29. So all right, everybody, that kind of wraps up our hour here. It is 5 o'clock on the East Coast. So I hope all of y'all have a great weekend. Look forward to talking with you many more times over the course of 2021. Hope to hear back from some of you on future Ask Andrew Anything that you've done some deals. Would love to have someone jump back on and say, hey, I'm doing a deal. Let's talk about it. Would love to talk about a live deal on this. And yeah, we'll continue answering questions. So y'all have a great rest of the day and weekend. If you want to connect with me, I'm on all the socials. Connect with me on Bigger Pockets. As I mentioned before, you can go, just Google Vantage Point Acquisitions, our website, VPACQ. There's a couple of tabs there where you can connect with me in a variety of ways. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.